Isaiah 49:6. It is too light a thing that you should be my servant. You know, for right now, I'm just going to have to read it right out of here because I got something going on with my eyes, so let's do this. Nope, there it is. It is too light a thing that you should be my servant to raise up the tribes of Jacob and to bring back the preserved of Israel. I will make you as a light for the nations, that my salvation may reach to the end of the earth. Do you guys have nativity scenes at home? Do you put them up all this time of year? Does your nativity scenes have kings, the wise men?
Yeah, one of them is.
I had one that my kids, I would put it out, and mine had wise men too. And of course, it had Mary, Joseph, a couple of shepherds, a few animals, baby Jesus, Mary, Joseph. And I would put it up, and then I would go to bed, and the next morning I'd get up, and everything would be gone. All except for the manger. And I would go, well, what in the world? And I was thinking, well, maybe the dog or the cats got up in there and took all the critters away. And then I'd walk around the house, and all of a sudden you'd see things scattered in the house. And I had to ask my kids, what the heck? And they said, well, Jesus isn't born yet. And each day, everything would move closer. They did it every year. And it was like, what are you guys doing to me? You're making my mind go, ah! And they's like, well, but it's true, Dad. They've never been there. It's too early on Christmas morning, and everything would just be there perfect. But they would bring these three wise men. They would bring these three wise men and set them there. And then finally I had to start taking the wise men away.
Yeah.
And say, it's too early. And they said, well, but. And I'm like, what's good for you is good for me. However romantic the picture of these three wise people are, the Bible tells us just a little bit of different story about these Magi, and they are very fascinating people. I really did a deep delve into these guys this last week, and I'll tell you, I learned more about them than I thought was possible. But they are so fascinating, and even though they've got crowns on their heads, almost like at Kingston they had the fancy porcelain ones, and I mean all painted, and these guys were not kings. They were not kings. And we're going to see something with these folks that came that actually points ahead to the future beyond our days. It's all what their visit is prophetic. Their gifts are prophetic. And their visit is the same. And all of it points to a lot of things in the future. And there was some stuff that when I studied them, I had no clue about and I didn't even know. So we're going to look at Matthew 2, verses 1 through 12 to start with. And then we're going to kind of do a little bit of bouncing throughout this 12 verses of Scripture. So let's look at Matthew 2, verses 1 through 12. Now after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him. When Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all of Jerusalem with him. And assembling all the chief priests and the scribes and the people, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born, and they told him, in Bethlehem of Judea. For so it was written by the prophet, and you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means the least among the rulers of Judah. For from you shall come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel. Then Herod summoned the wise men secretly and ascertained from them what time the star had appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, go and search diligently for the child. And when you have found him, bring me word, that I too may come and worship him. After listening to the king, they went on their way, and behold, the star that they had seen when it rose went before them until it came to rest over a place where the child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. And going into the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother. And they fell down and worshipped him. Then opening their treasures, they offered him gifts, gold and frankincense and myrrh. And being warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they departed to their own country by another way. So who were these Magi? These famous people from the East? Well, like I said, they weren't kings, despite what that lovely Christmas carol that we just sang said, "We three kings of Orion are." It's beautiful poetry, but it's not a bad song, but it's not really true of what the Bible tells us about them. They weren't kings, and actually the word Magi comes from the tribe of their origin, which is the Magi. They lived in the area of the Medes and the Persians, who eventually conquered Babylon. They lived in what we would call modern Iran. So guess what? They were Iranians. Now, from the word Magi, we get two English words. We get magistrate and magic. Now, both of those are really, really important when you look at it in biblical times and biblical senses. The word magic, because these people claimed to know the future. They claimed it. They would study the stars. They were into astronomy. Now, we know folks that are into astronomy. They set up their little telescopes in the darkest places they can find, and they look at the stars and they check things out, and they just have a wonderful time. But these guys were more than just into astronomy. They actually had more accurate charts and stuff than any other country in the world at that time. Boy, what do you think they would have had if they'd have had the Hubble telescope? They'd have been seeing things way out in the space. They studied these charts. They were students of the stars. But they didn't just leave it at that. If they'd have just left it at that, they'd have been all right. But they got into astrology, which is different than astronomy because, well, astrology is the idea that you can look at the stars and you can predict the future off of them. It's totally faulty, and a lot of idolatrous religions of the world have gotten into this type of thing. And the Magi, well, they were definitely into this stuff. They thought that they could predict the future on the base of the positions of the stars and planets. Also, they were able, so they believed, to interpret dreams using the same things. Now, all kings and emperors and even dictators, even in today's times, they really want to know what the future holds, don't they? They want to know so that they can plan for their people and for their country. We know about Joseph. Joseph, he was able to interpret dreams. He gave the Pharaoh at the time the answer to the dreams, and guess what? He made Joseph the magistrate, and he did wonderful things for the people. Just how did these Magi know? How did they know what to look for? And actually, the timing of it. How did they know all of this stuff? Well, I believe from my studying, and this just could be my opinion, and it's okay, we all have them. It came in the time of Daniel. Think about it. In Daniel, King Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, he had a dream. Well, he had a couple of them, but he had one particular dream, and it troubled him. And he wanted to know the proper interpretations of the dream. Daniel 2, verses 1 and 2. In the second year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams. His spirit was troubled and his sleep left him. Then the king commanded that the magicians, the enchanters, the sorcerers, and the Chaldeans be summoned to tell the king his dreams. So they came in and stood before the king. He wanted to know the certain interpretations of these dreams because he felt it told him something important of the future. And of course we know it did. It was a special kind of dream that God had sent. So he said, I'm going to give you guys a test, you Magi and you sorcerers and all you people that delve in all this stuff. You've got to tell me what my dream was, and then you'll have the privilege of interpreting. Because if you can tell me what my dream was, then I know you have the power to interpret it. Well, Daniel 2:10, their response was, the Magi said, no king or emperor, however mighty, has ever asked this of anyone. How in the world can we tell you what your dream is? You tell us a dream, and we'll give you a sure and certain interpretation. He's like, oh, heck no. Heck no. You're just trying to gain time. I am going to kill all of you if you do not tell me what I dreamed. Well, Daniel was among those. Now, Daniel was not, I'm sure he was not standing there with all these folks right away. It's hard to say. But Daniel, we know he was in exile. He was called in and he offered the king information. He said, I'll give you everything you wanted to know about your dream if you give me one day to pray about it, to fast about it, and God will tell me what you need to know. So he says, all right, done. Wow, all these Magi and all these famous people that he brought before him, they must have been going, oh man, I hope Daniel can do this, else we're all going to die. They had a stay of execution. And Daniel did just what he said he was going to do. He went home, he prayed, he fasted, and God told him the dream. Now you remember this dream, of course. You remember what it was. It was that wonderful, great big tall statue with that gold head, the silver chest and arms, the bronze torso, the iron legs, and the feet partly made of mixed clay and iron. King Nebuchadnezzar, he told him, this is a flow of history from you, O king, forward. Each of these portions of the statue represents another kingdom. And it tells you what's going to happen in human history. And at the end, he gave the interpretation that the statue was destroyed by a stone cut not by human hands, which hit the foot of the statue and destroyed it into 1,000,000 bits, and then the stone cut not by human hands grew to be larger and larger until it conquered the whole world. Everyone wanted to know the interpretation of this dream. And Daniel said in Daniel 2:44 and 45, and in the days of those kings the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that shall never be destroyed, nor shall the kingdom be left to another people. It shall break into pieces all these kingdoms and bring them to an end, and it shall stand forever. Just as you saw that the stone was cut from a mountain by no human hand, and that it broke into pieces the iron, the bronze, the clay, and the silver, and the gold, a great God has made known to the king what shall be after this. The dream is certain, and its interpretation is sure. An incredible prophecy, an incredible one. And I think it was at that time that Daniel explained to them what it meant, and that there was going to be a king of the Jews descended from David, and that he was going to sit on David's throne and reign over his kingdom. Isaiah told us about this prophecy in Isaiah chapter 9. And I'm sure that Daniel knew about the prophecy, and he explained it to these ancestors of the Magi. Now you remember what he was explaining there, because that's when Daniel had that dream of the 70 weeks. And in that, he was told by prophecy that roughly 483 years after the Persian ruler that was going to be there at the time was going to say, go back and rebuild Jerusalem, is when this king should be arriving. So I'm kind of figuring that they went back when all was said and done, and they had this in their brains. And they told it from generation to generation to generation about what was to take place. And they went back and they continued studying stars. They continued to look to the heavens, predict the future, and sometimes accurately, sometimes not. You ever looked at horoscopes? Even just for fun? Oh, you're going to meet somebody today that's going to be, partially great in your future or whatever. We know that sometimes their predictions come true too. A lot of times not. But this prediction was of a kingdom specifically that would come after all these others, after the Roman Empire, and it would be set up. It was a sure and certain prediction and very accurate. All throughout the generations, the Magi continued to, and I think, to wonder, who is this king, and when will he be there? We were told he's going to be the king of the Jews. Then suddenly one day they looked up in the heavens and oh my gosh, what is that? They see this star and they say to themselves, this is something new. This is something we've never seen before. I just wonder if this is telling us that the new king of the Jews is here. Matthew 2:9. Matthew 2:2b. For we saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him. See, they followed this star and they came to Herod. And an actual better translation would be, we have seen a star in its rising as it rose up. And I think what happened was they were looking for the stars and the planets, and this very strange thing happened, and they just knew. They just knew that this is the star we were told about. This is the thing that was supposed to happen. And if you look at the time frame, that's just about right. And the thing that was really weird about this star is it moved. It moved. Stars don't move. Planets do. Stars don't. Matthew 2:9. Like I said, we're going to be bouncing back and forth in Matthew on this. After listening to the king, they went on their way, and behold, the star that they had seen when it rose went before them until it came to rest over the place where the child was. This star moved. This was something that was really bizarre, even to them. They knew better. So this was special. We know that stars don't move, they just stay fixed. It's planets that moved. Actually, the Greek word for wander is plania. We get the word planet from wandering. So it's the planets that move around. Stars pretty much stay fixed. That's how you can navigate from the stars. Wouldn't it be terrible if you looked up to try to follow the North Star and it wasn't there no more? It was over here. Man, after a while you might be doing circles. This star moved and led them to Bethlehem. What was this star? I really don't know. Some people say, oh, it was all these different planets that lined up together and it stayed that way, but for 2 years? Nah, I'm not necessarily buying on to that. See, I'm thinking more along the lines of, well, it was a God thing. How did God lead Israel out of Egypt? At night he had a pillar of fire. And I think that what it was, if you take this pillar of fire and you squeeze it down, and you put it up in the sky and it moves, it might have been the Shekinah glory of God. Think about this star. Where else do you hear about in the Bible the prophecy about the star? There's only 2 places, and it's really not prophecy. You don't hear that the shepherds followed a star, or said, oh, look, there's the star above the manger. We better go check it out. After the angels came. The angels came and the glory of God shone and told them the wondrous news. I think that when they saw the Shekinah glory, they said, this is very unusual. This is not a normal star. And so they wanted to follow it and check it out. So they followed it. And every night they would go, there it is again. Let's go. If they knew that the star was taking them, it was a special star, and it was taking them to a specific place, and they might have even known about the prophecy of where the Christ child was going to be born. So why did they go to Jerusalem instead of Bethlehem? Jesus was in Bethlehem, wasn't he? Why were they led to Jerusalem? What was it that they had to do? We know God was speaking to them and communicating to the Magi by means of dreams. That's what we were told in Matthew 2:12. And being warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they departed to their own country by another way. Since God actually communicated to them by means of a dream, was leading them with what I believe was his Shekinah glory, he could have easily have warned them ahead of time not to go to Jerusalem. But he let them go there, sent them there. Why? He could have told them, don't go to King Herod, he's a crumb bum. He's got nothing but evil planned in his mind and his heart. Well, what was the outcome of the visit to Herod? Think about it. If the Magi had just quietly slipped into the country and found where Jesus was, worshipped him, gave him the gifts, and then went back to their own country, Herod would never have heard about it. There would have been quiet and silence. But God did not want his son entering the world silently in this way. After all, God made specific predictions and prophecies that needed to be fulfilled. So God came to Herod, and he knew exactly what Herod would do. He knew exactly how Herod would react. The outcome was that King Herod heard about this and was troubled. He was distressed. And he stirred things up. Matthew 2:3, when Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all of Jerusalem with him. The word troubled means raised into turbulence, storming around inside. And all of Jerusalem with him means he agitated all the neighborhoods. He was going around, hey, where is this guy? Where is this kid? Where is this king? Perhaps he was looking for Jesus. He didn't really know where he was, stirred up and turbulent. Well, what was the outcome of his visit to Jerusalem? Several prophecies were set into motion. The killing of the babies, the taking of Jesus to Egypt, and the prophecy of Hosea 11:1. When Israel was a child, I loved him, and out of Egypt I called my son. He had to set it in motion so that they would go to Egypt. So the Magi actually were led to Jerusalem to get King Herod all stirred up so that the prophecies would be fulfilled. At the time, Herod, he had a title. You know what that title was? Oh, you're thinking pretty hard. I see it. You're thinking pretty hard. Herod was called the King of the Jews. He got that title because he was really good friends and buddy-buddy with Caesar Augustus. And he said, I'm going to make you the king here, and you are the King of the Jews. Was Herod a Jew? No, he was an Edomite. So he took all this stuff, he took that title, and he went back and he began reign as King of the Jews. And so Herod was so disturbed because he thought he was just about to lose everything. What do you mean asking, where's the King of the Jews? Where has he been born? I'm the King of the Jews. I am Herod the Great. Herod didn't realize what was about to happen. He didn't realize what Jesus said in Matthew 16:25. For whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. Herod couldn't care less. What should he have done when the Magi came and asked? He should have been like the great king of Nineveh in the book of Jonah. He should have taken off his royal robes, taken off his crown, and got off the throne and go down to Bethlehem and to worship Jesus. But he wouldn't do that. Instead, Herod in Matthew 2:4, he assembled everybody together, all the chief priests and the scribes of the people, and he inquired of them, where was the Christ to be born? The chief priests and teachers of the law, they knew where the Christ was to be born. Believe it or not, they actually probably, if they'd have thought about it, they'd have said, hey, it's about that time. And Daniel in his 70 weeks, it's almost that time. But they didn't. They didn't pay attention. But they told him he was supposed to be born in Bethlehem, and for this is what the prophet had written. And that identification was very so accurate, wasn't it? Matthew 2:7-8. Then Herod summoned us. He'd already sent the wise men away because he didn't know. And then Herod summoned the wise men secretly and ascertained from them what time the star had appeared. And see, this is what I'm sitting there thinking. This is what I'm thinking. If you'd have seen the Shekinah glory over Bethlehem at the time, I'm pretty sure a lot of people would have said, hey, what's that? When did this star appear? And he sent them to Bethlehem saying, go and search diligently for the child. And when you have found him, bring word to me that I may too come and worship him. You see, King Herod, he's a mock worshiper. What is a mock worshiper? Somebody who worships not in truth or spirit, but somebody who makes pretense at worship. And that's what King Herod did when he called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time that that star appeared to them. Hey guys, let me know if you find him so I can go and worship him too. Do you think Herod wanted to go and worship the King of the Jews? Oh, heck no. He went crazy when the Magi didn't return, when they didn't return. Oh, I know they found him. Oh, how dare them. Oh, now I got to go and look for myself. He went insane with rage. God protected Jesus just for that short amount of time that the Magi spoke to Herod and went and worshipped him. That short amount of time that they spent visiting Mary and Joseph and Jesus. And it gave them just enough time between them, Herod realizing they lied, they didn't come back to me, for Mary and Joseph to take Jesus and leave. He had no intention of worshiping. Worship means to sacrifice or to ascribe value to something, to look at something and say, that's valuable. This is valuable. But it goes beyond that. There is an attraction, a strength to worship, to love, an affection to worship. Herod ascribed value to Jesus' coming, but he hated it. He hated it. This is going to replace me. He was angry at it, he rejected it, and he was threatened by it. So you see that he is not a true worshiper, he is a mock worshiper. Matthew 9 through 12. After listening to the king, they went on their way, and behold, the star that they had seen when it rose went before them until it came to rest over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy, and going into the house, they saw the child with Mary his mother. And they fell down and worshipped him. Then opening their treasures, they offered him gifts, gold and frankincense and myrrh. And being warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they departed to their own country by another way. The Magi got what they were looking for. That miraculous star guiding them right to the home, the very home. And when they saw the star, they were overjoyed. They knew that they weren't quite where they needed to be yet. They were so happy to see this thing show up and take them where they went. Do you see the difference between the Magi and Herod? Herod was angry. He was angry. And they were joyful. I thought that the Magi came when Jesus was around 2 years old, but you know what? After looking more closely at the scripture itself, I have no idea how old Jesus was. The star may have shown up long before he was born so they could start traveling. All I know is he wasn't in a manger at the time, but in a house when they arrived. The Magi, they came into the house and they find their object of worship. They find Jesus Christ. Now, I really don't know what they knew about Jesus at that moment. Did they really understand that he was God incarnate? That all their idolatrous worship systems had to be put aside? That this was the King of Kings who had come to earth to die on a cross for them? I don't think they could have known that at all. But perhaps Mary and Joseph, and maybe there were some shepherds still coming to visit Jesus, and they might have told them all more about what the shepherds were told by the angels. They might have been told more about the prophecies and predictions about this child. They knelt down and they worshiped. They worshiped. And that was the end of their journey. And it was a long journey. It was a difficult journey. But it was consummated with joy and with worship and with a bending of their knees. How often do we get to enjoy that kind of joy in our lifetimes? And then it says they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold and frankincense and myrrh. Now, we all know that some of this comes down to prophecy as well. But what was the meaning? What is the meaning of these gifts? Well, we know that these Magi were prophetic visitors, and I think that they were Gentiles because, well, they're from Persia, they're Iranians. And they're outside of their own country. And we are told, just like we saw in the opening scripture, that the light of the world is going to draw everything from around the world to him. And so the very visit of these Magi coming to worship Jesus is a prophecy that one day this gospel message will spread the entire earth, the ends of the earth. Jesus said himself in Matthew 24:14, and this gospel of the kingdom will be proclaimed throughout the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. The Magi are prophetic visitors that someday this little boy would grow up and be the Savior of the world. Not just of Jews, but now I'm going to go, it says I got sidetracked a little bit, now we'll get back to the gifts. I hate when I get sidetracked. The fact that they even brought gifts is prophetic. It says in Isaiah 2:2, in the last days, the mountain of the Lord's temple will be established as chief among the mountains. It will be raised above the hills, and all the nations will stream to it. The streaming of the nations to Jesus. Well, it happens because the disciples go out to the ends of the earth and preach the gospel. This is the streaming of all the nations. Isaiah 60 verse 1 says, and this gospel of the kingdom will be proclaimed throughout the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. And Isaiah 60 verses 5 and 6 says, then you will look and be radiant. Speaking of Jerusalem, your heart will throb and swell with joy. The wealth of the seas will be brought to you. To you the riches of the nations will come. Herds of camels will cover your land. Young camels from Midian and Ephah and all from Sheba will come, bearing gold and incense and proclaiming the praise of the Lord. It's all been prophesied and predicted that the Gentiles will come to the ends of the earth and bring gold and incense and worship Jesus. But I think these gifts actually symbolize something a little deeper. Why did God send his son to earth? What did he want? Simply put, he wants you. He wants your hearts. He wants you as you are. He wants your worship. He wants you to love him. He wants you to kneel before him and give him homage and honor and praise. That's what he wants. And what is he willing to pay for it? He's willing to pay the death of his own son, the blood of his own son. That's what it's worth to him. Those gifts, gold. Do you know that more wars have been fought over gold than any other precious substance on earth? Some call it the material of kings. How about that frankincense? What do you know about frankincense? Well, frankincense actually comes from a rare Arabian tree. There was an article in National Geographic a bunch of years ago, and speaking about frankincense, and it notes that you take a knife and you cut the bark of the tree, and you leave it cut. And it oozes out this gooey substance that kind of hardens a little bit, and you go back and you cut it off, and it just keep on oozing. It's a time-consuming thing to grab all this stuff. And when you break it off, it continues to go. So if you're a frankincense, I guess farmer, is that what you would call it? I don't know, a gatherer, I don't know. But if that's what you do, man, you're going to be wealthy because it's a very rare substance. Well, frankincense was also used for medicine. The Magi probably used it for medicine, so they gave it to Jesus. Maybe a hint at Jesus' healing ministry and the fact that he would be able to heal people. I don't know, maybe. But do you also know that frankincense is also one of those ingredients in the worship that they were told about when they were wandering in the desert under the tabernacle? It was one of the ingredients in making the incense that was burned and sent up to God every time that the sacrifices were made. It is really a symbol of praise, isn't it? It's a symbol of worship. Incense going up to God and praising his name. But what about myrrh? Well, of these three gifts, myrrh is the only one that makes a reappearance in the Gospels. In John chapter 19, a man named Joseph of Arimathea brought some myrrh to Jesus and mixed it up with some strips of linen and wrapped it around Jesus' dead body. It's kind of a sticky substance, and it would have stuck to all those linens to help put it together and stick it in shape, and you could mold it kind of, sort of. After a few days later, the disciples visited, and the myrrh was there, the linens were there, but the body wasn't. It's a prediction of the death of Jesus Christ, also of his resurrection. For he didn't come to just die, but to give his life as a ransom for us all, and to be raised from the dead on that third day. Prophetic visitors, prophetic gifts, but the modern application for us is really simple. It's really simple. You have in this story, in these 12 verses, two paradigms of how to respond to Jesus' coming. You have King Herod, you got King Herod, and you have the Magi. King Herod, selfish, threatened by the coming, would never consider taking off those royal robes and worshiping Jesus. Instead, he's going to do everything he can to attack him and, if possible, kill him. It's a hatred of Jesus. And then you got those Magi. Sacrificial love for Jesus. They came from the ends of the earth to worship him. Give everything they have in honor of him. You see those two things in the world today still. You either hate him or you love him. I know what you guys feel. I know which side of you guys are looking at. You're more like the Magi. You love him to pieces, and you're willing to give him everything you have to honor him. And that's why we're supposed to go out and try and share with everybody just what it means to become a follower of Christ, to let them know how much God loves them. Let's go to prayer.